In this episode, we're looking at Sikhism and how it all started by going back to the very first Guru, Guru Nanak. When you try to understand a religion, it's not enough just to ask who began it. You also have to ask why did it come about and what kind of world it was responding to. That brings us to Punjab where Guru Nanak was born, what people believed there and how things were divided, and all the religious and social tensions that were already shaping daily life. This is the thread that runs through the whole story. Regular people in Punjab were living in systems that split humans up by caste, by creed, and by how close they were to power. Guru Nanak's message didn't show up out of nowhere. It was a direct response to that world. Punjab is a region now split between a state in northern India and a province in Pakistan, both called Punjab. Its name comes from Persian, Panj meaning five and Ab meaning water, referring to the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej rivers, the land of five rivers. In Guru Nanak's time, it was a river plain, a patchwork of clans, castes, villages, and local communities that shared a landscape more than a single political identity. Punjab was shaped over many centuries by Vedic and later Brahmanical traditions, but it was never one single uniform religious world. It is more accurate to think of two overlapping religious spheres because the tensions between them sits at the heart of everything Guru Nanak later challenged. One was Brahmanical Hinduism, the institutional Sanskrit-based priestly form of religion controlled by the Brahmin caste. In that world, Brahmins held authority over ritual, sacred texts, and formal access to God. If you were ranked among the lower castes, you were told that was simply your place in life. The other was a popular village religion, the religion of ordinary farmers, artisans, herders, and local communities. It was older, simpler, more personal, and tied to the land, the seasons, clan ancestors, and local shrines. No Sanskrit required. But the deeper problem was that caste ran through both worlds. In Brahmanical religion, caste shaped ritual authority and spiritual status. In village life, it still shaped honor, rank, and human worth. Caste was not just an idea, it shaped who you could eat with, whose water you could accept, and who counted as spiritually respectable. So the issue was not simply elite religion looking down on popular religion. It was that both religion and society were structured by hierarchy, separating people by status and unequal dignity. Many productive communities, including major farming communities such as the Jats, could hold real local importance while still being ranked below the higher caste in Brahmanical society. But this was not a grievance felt by one group alone. Across Punjab, communities at almost every level of the caste order could find themselves denied full spiritual dignity, whether told they were ranked too low to access the divine or told that the status they claimed for themselves was not recognized by those in religious authority. The openness of so many communities across Punjab to both Islam and Sikhism makes much more sense in that light. Arab general Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh and reached Multan in southern Punjab, the first significant military contact between Islam and Punjab heartland. It did not immediately change the religious character of central or northern Punjab, but it opened the door that would not close for the next 800 years. Muhammad of Ghazni conquered Punjab and made Lahore its eastern capital. For the first time, Punjab's major city was under formal Muslim political rule. That political fact would last until the Sikh Empire in the 19th century. So now a mostly Hindu population had Muslim rulers above them and Brahmin priests around them, living under two systems of authority, neither of which particularly served ordinary people. 11th to 14th century, Sufi Islam spread on foot, not by sword. This is one of the most important developments before Guru Nanak, and it happened quietly. Sufi teachers and Muslim holy men, mystics who emphasize direct personal experience of God over legalism or ritual, walked into Punjab's villages and stayed. They did not first arrive as conquerors, they arrived as holy men. Ali Hujwiri, buried in Lahore, was one of the earliest great Sufi teachers in Punjab. But the most influential Sufi network was the Christie order. The Christies built their reputation on charity, service, devotion, and the radical idea that music and love could draw a person towards God more directly than legal scholarship ever could. Just as important, they tried to stay away from rulers and courts. That gave them credibility with ordinary people that court religion could never match. Baba Freed, one of the greatest figures in this tradition, preached across central Punjab for decades. Many communities converted to Islam in the generations after his influence, and his poetry would later be included in the Guru Granth Sahib. Nizamuddin Ulia carried that same model through political upheaval in Delhi. He mattered because he showed that spiritual authority could be built by refusing political entanglement. And the Sufi message itself was simple and powerful. God is accessible to every human being, no Brahmin, no Sanskrit, no caste qualifications. For communities told for generations that their birth ranked them lower in spiritual worth, that was not merely attractive, it was liberating. The Bhakti movement travels north. At the time, reform was also rising from within Hindu traditions themselves. The Bhakti movement began in South India with poet sants singing devotion to God in the language of ordinary people. That meant bypassing Sanskrit, bypassing priests, and often bypassing caste. Over time, that current moved north, and by the 14th and 15th centuries it had reached the world Guru Nanak would inherit. Ravidas, a Dalit leatherworker from Varanasi, attacked caste with extraordinary directness. He imagined Begumpura, a city without sorrow, without caste, and without domination. 41 of his verses are in the Guru Granth Sahib. Kabir, a Muslim weaver from Varanasi, attacked both Hindu priests and Muslim clerics with equal force. His message was devastatingly simple: God has no religion, and caste is meaningless. 541 of his verses are in the Guru Granth Sahib. Kabir is especially important here. He said in essence much of what Guru Nanak would later say. His word spread, his influence was real, but when he died, his followers split. His words survived, but his movement did not consolidate. This may have been one of the lessons of the period. What happens when you change hearts without building structure? 1206 to 1526, the Delhi Sultanate rules Punjab. For more than 3 centuries, a succession of Muslim dynasties ruled North India from Delhi, with Punjab as their strategic gateway. By this point, religion had two lives in Punjab. There was the lived religion of ordinary people, and there was the political religion used by rulers and elites to justify taxation, hierarchy, law, and control. Those were not always the same thing. On the ground, that meant Muslim rulers at the top of political life, Hindu Brahmin priests still controlling religious and social life within Hindu communities, ordinary people, Hindu and Muslim alike, living under both systems at once. A widening gap between official religion and lived spiritual life. Both the Brahmin establishment and Muslim religious class visibly serving power rather than the people. 1351 to 1388, Firuz Shah enforces the Jizya. Under Firuz Shah, Sunni Islam was used as active state policy. The Jizya marked Hindus as second-class subjects. Sufi orders were tolerated, but Hindu public practice was restricted. The Jizya marked Hindus as second-class subjects. Sufi orders were tolerated, but Hindu public practice was restricted. That contrast mattered. The state charged you for being the wrong religion. The Christi Kanaka fed you, asked nothing, and turned no one away. For many ordinary people, the Sufi space was not first a theological argument, it was simply the most dignified place they could walk into. 1398, Timu's invasion shatters Delhi and Punjab. He swept down from Central Asia and sacked Delhi with catastrophic violence. Punjab lay on his route. This was only 71 years before Guru Nanak's birth, close enough to sit within family memory. That matters because invasions like this do more than kill. They remind everyone that political authority is brutal, unstable, and unable to protect ordinary people. Hindu and Muslim civilians suffered alike. Sufi shrines became refuge precisely because they asked no religious question at the door. That memory did not fade quickly. 1414 to 1451, the Sayyid dynasty and the fragmentation of power. The Sayyid rulers held Delhi, but their authority was weak. When central control weakens, local religious life often breathes more freely. Hindu practices, Sufi spaces, and devotional movements had room to grow outside the capital. It was in exactly that kind of opening that Bhakti voices such as Kabir found space. 1420 to 1470, Zain ul Abidin of Kashmir tolerance as policy. At the same time, Kashmir showed that this period was not one simple story of permanent hostility. Zain ul Abdin, known as Badshah, the Great King, abolished the jizya, restored temples destroyed by earlier rulers, and allowed reconversion from Islam to Hinduism. Under him, Kashmiri Sufi and Shavati thought influenced each other openly. That mattered because it reminds us that the relationship between Islam and Hinduism in this era was never uniform. It depended heavily on who held power and what they chose to do with it. 1451 to 1489, Bilal Lodi and the hardening of caste. Under Bilal Lodi, the jizya remained in place. Meanwhile, some lower caste Hindus converted to Islam in part to escape caste constraints, and Orthodox Hindu responses often hardened caste lines even further. So pressure from above was increasing on both sides. The Sufi shrines and Bhakti gathering became some of the few places that social calculus did not apply. 1440 to 1518, Kabir is active, the ground continues to shift. By now, the ground was clearly shifting. Kabir preached what later sounds strikingly close to Guru Nanak's message: no Hindu, no Muslim, no caste. God is one. His message spread, but it did not harden into a stable community. And that is the point. Kabir showed the message could spread. Guru Nanak would show that it could be organized. 1489 to 1517, Sikandar Lodi, the most intolerant sultan. Guru Nanak came of age under Sikandar Lodi, one of the most intolerant of the Lodi rulers. He destroyed temples, banned Hindu festivals in Delhi, and used religious orthodoxy to strengthen the political authority. But repression often had unattended consequences. When physical temples were attacked, many people turned inwards, exactly as Bhakti teachers had long urged them to do. The harder the establishment pushed, the more people searched for a third path. 1451 to 1526, the Lodi Sultanate is visibly weakening. Throughout Guru Nanak's adult life, the political order behind orthodox authority was visibly weakening. Functional conflict, rebellious governors, and the looming threat of Babur were all eroding the old system. That did not mean hierarchy disappeared, but it did mean the establishment was becoming less able to enforce conformity. The weakening political order made challenge to orthodoxy easier to sustain. By the time Guru Nanak was born, Punjab had already heard the anti-caste challenge of Bhakti, the direct devotional language of Sufism, and the political language of Muslim rule. By the time Guru Nanak was born, Punjab had already heard the anti-caste challenge of Bhakti, the direct devotional language of Sufism, and the political language of Muslim rule. What it had not yet seen was a community that could hold those insights together, live them daily, and survive its founder. 15th April 1469. Guru Nanak was born at Dalwandi in 1469. The year is widely agreed, the month is disputed. The April date has strong support in early traditions and internal calculations. Dying aged 70 years, 5 months and 7 days on 22nd September 1539 points mathematically to an April birth. He was born into a Khatri family, the Hindu merchant administrator caste, a step above many farming communities in the social standing, but below the Brahmins. His father was a government accountant, which meant the household was literate and connected to administration. The family moved in both Punjabi and Persian worlds, giving Guru Nanak unusual access to both Hindu and Muslim intellectual environments. Looking at the Punjab he was born into, Western Punjab had seen deep Sufi influence and large-scale conversion. Eastern Punjab remained mostly Hindu. Many communities lived in between, practicing local and less orthodox forms of both. Both the Brahmin class and the Muslim religious establishment were both failing ordinary people in different ways. This is the soil Guru Nanak grew out of. He did not invent his message from nothing. He gave extraordinary clarity to what many ordinary people had already been reaching towards. 1469, Rai Bulabati. What was happening at village level? At the village level, the story of Rai Bular matters. A A Muslim landlord in Talwandi became one of Nanak's earliest admirers, recognizing spiritual depth across the religious boundaries of the time. Whether every later detail told about that relationship is historical or not, the basic point matters. Village life often contained a degree of human closeness that formal religious establishments struggled to control. 1498 to 1547. Mirabai, the same message from the other end of society. Around the same time, Mirabai was expressing a parallel spiritual rebellion from a very different social position. She was a Rajput princess who rejected royal status, caste, privilege, and restrictive gender expectations for devotion to Krishna. Her poetry gave voice to people, especially women and the lower status listeners, who felt spiritually suffocated by the structures around them. Both Nanak and Mirabai were saying the same thing at the same time from opposite ends of Indian society, that God belonged to everyone and that the gatekeepers of religion had no authority over the human soul. 1517 to 1526. Ibrahim Lodi collapsed from within. Ibrahim Lodi, the last sultan, did not fall only to Babur, he fell first to himself. He executed hundreds of his own Afghan nobles, alienating the very military class that held the sultanate together. Daulat Khan Lodi, the same official associated with Sultanpur and Guru Nanak's working world, eventually invited Babur to invade. By the time Babur crossed the border, Nanak was already traveling and preaching to communities where political authority had ceased to mean anything, and spiritual community had become the only reliable source of continuity and dignity. 1504. Kartarpur founded. Kartarpur is where everything changes. Land donated by a follower on the banks of the river Ravi, Guru Nanak farmed there, composed there, gathered people there, and built the first real institution of what would later become Sikhism. And the langar, the communal kitchen open to all, took equality out of the realm of ideas and put it into daily practice. Many before Guru Nanak had criticized hierarchy. What Nanak did differently was give equality a place, a routine, a meal, and eventually a succession. In 15th century Punjab, eating together was not a small thing. It defined social identity. Sharing food across caste lines could be treated as polluting and could result in caste excommunication. So the langar was not just a symbol, it was a direct and repeated assault on hierarchy. It still functions in every gurdwara worldwide today, feeding anyone who walks in regardless of faith, caste, or class. 1520 to 1521. Babur's invasion and the Babur Bani. This is one of the most important moments in the whole story. Babur, a Central Asian ruler descended from both Timur and Genghis Khan, had been making incursions into northern India since 1519. Between 1520 and 21, his forces were moving through Punjab and the town of Saidpur was sacked with extreme violence. Civilians were killed, women were enslaved, and homes were destroyed. This was not distant politics, it was violence in the world Guru Nanak inhabited. What makes this moment especially important is that it is one of the rare places where Guru Nanak's own word can be cross-referenced against an entirely independent source. Babur's own memoir, the Baburnama, confirms the sack of Saidpur. Guru Nanak's four Baburvani hymns describe the same events with the texture of eyewitness, the wailing of women, the dead left unburied, the silence of God in the face of mass violence. Now think about what this meant to people living through it. Here was a Muslim army whose ruler had declared himself the holy warrior, slaughtered Muslims and Hindu civilians alike. Here was a Hindu religious establishment that had spent centuries insisting caste hierarchy was the divine order, offering nothing, protecting no one. Both systems had promised, in different ways, that they held the keys to God's favor. Both had failed visibly, catastrophically, in the same afternoon. Guru Nanak's response in the Baburvani was not to preach calm acceptance. He asked directly, why had God permitted this? He named the suffering. He wrote about specific people. This was not a timeless abstraction. It was a response to a specific political act of violence, written by a man who had seen what religion had failed to prevent. If you want to understand why Guru Nanak's message resonated the way it did, Babur is a large part of the answer. For many people, Babur's invasion would have confirmed what years of Sufi and Bhakti critique had already suggested. The old religious establishment could not save them. In one act of conquest, the credibility of both establishments collapsed simultaneously. Guru Nanak was already there, already preaching, already offering something different. 1526 Battle of Paniput. The Mughal Empire begins. Babur returned in force in 1526 and defeated Ibrahim Lodi at the Battle of Paniput, ending the Lodi Sultanate permanently. Guru Nanak was 57 years old. He had outlived the entire political order he had been born into. The Mughal Empire that Babur founded that afternoon would be the backdrop of every Sikh Guru who followed him, and its character would matter enormously to whether Sikhism survived or was crushed in its early decades. Babur declared himself a holy warrior after Panipat, and a mosque was built at Ayodhya during his reign. Though the history of the site remains disputed, he used religious war as political legitimacy for conquest while governing pragmatically when it suited him. For ordinary people, the message remained the same. Rulers used religion as a tool, and ordinary people paid the price. 7th September 1539, Bailena appointed Guru Angad. Guru Nanak passed the Guruship over both his biological sons, choosing merit over bloodline. The man he chose, Bailena, had arrived at Kartarpur years earlier as a devoted Hindu on pilgrimage, heard Guru Nanak's hymns on the road, and never completed that journey. He stayed, served, and became the second Guru. 22nd September 1539, Guru Nanak dies at Kartarpur. He left behind 974 hymns, a succession chosen by merit over family, a communal kitchen still feeding people, and a community of Sikh learners spread across Punjab. No biography had been written. The religion that would carry his name was still decades from taking institutional shape. 1540 to 1545. Sher Shah Suri, a brief window of stability. Babur's son Humayun inherited the Mughal Empire but could not hold it. He was defeated by Sher Shah Suri in 1540 and fled into exile in Persia. Sher Shah Suri governed with relative religious tolerance, appointing non-Muslims to senior positions and making no moves to suppress emerging religious communities. For the young Sikh community at Kartarpur, still finding its feet in the years after Guru Nanak's death, this mattered. The immediate years of Guru Angad's leadership were not years of persecution, they were years of consolidation, time the movement desperately needed to take root. Looking ahead, Humayun, Akbar, and what came next. Humayun eventually returned from Persian exile and reclaimed the Mughal throne, but it was his son Akbar who changed everything. Akbar, who ruled from 1556 to 1605, became one of the most religiously tolerant rulers in Indian history, abolishing the jizya, elevating non-Muslims to senior court position, and maintaining a respectful relationship with the Sikh gurus. It was under Akbar's reign that the land was granted that would eventually become Amritsar, the spiritual center of the Sikh world. The community Guru Nanak founded had the political breathing room it needed to grow into something permanent precisely because the Mughal Empire for a critical period chose tolerance over suppression. That would not last, but by the time it ended, Sikhism was already strong enough to survive. Why he succeeded where others failed. The message of no Hindu, no Muslim, no caste had been said before. Kabir said it, Ravidas said it, Baba Farid approached it from another direction. None of them failed. They all shifted the spiritual landscape of Punjab, but none of them built something that outlasted them. Guru Nanak succeeded for 5 reasons working simultaneously. The ground had been prepared. 300 years of Bhakti and Sufi work had created an audience spiritually ready for his clarity. He was not asking people to believe something alien. He was the harvest of what others had planted. He was the right person, a Khatri, educated, respected, socially positioned to speak to everyone without being dismissed by anyone. When he challenged Brahmin ritual, he was a pair speaking to pairs. When he challenged Muslim clerics, he spoke their language and engaged their theology on its own terms. He appeared at the right moment. The Lodi Sultanate was fracturing. Both religious establishments had lost credibility. Babur's invasion had proved in blood that neither Brahmin nor Qazi could protect ordinary people. He communicated the right way, in the people's own languages, about the real things happening in the real world, requiring nothing beyond honest living. Meditate on God's name, earn honestly, share what you have. He built what nobody before him had built, a daily practice of equality in the langar, his words in writing, and crucially, a successor. That last decision gave the movement 2 centuries of institutional continuity, 10 gurus, a compiled scripture, and the time to grow into something that could not be undone. The message was not unique. The man, the moment, and the institution together were. What we have seen in this episode is not a single story, it is 3 stories running at the same time. The growth and spread of religions across a region, Vedic tradition, Islamic carried by Sufi teachers, Bhakti voices rising from within Hinduism itself, each one reshaping how ordinary people understood God, community, and their place in the world. The political rulers who shaped, restricted, taxed, and at times destroyed religious life, not out of pure faith, but because religion was also power. Who you worshipped and how you worshipped, and whether you were free to do so at all. None of that was ever purely a matter of faith. It was always a matter of power. And running beneath both of those, caste, carried across borders, across conversations, across dynasties, surviving not because any religion taught it as truth, but because status is harder to surrender. Even when the tradition you follow explicitly tells you not to, that pattern repeated across Hinduism and Islam alike. And it is still heavily present in Sikhism today, a religion that was built on the explicit rejection of it. Those 3 forces, religion, politics, and caste, kept individuals and communities in continuous conflict and continuous motion. And it was into that world, at that precise moment of tension, that Guru Nanak, Kabir, Ravidas, Baba Farid, and others spoke. Not just to the idea of caste, but to the assumption beneath it, that any human being by birth alone was not worth more or less than the other. They saw what the assumption did in practice. They watched it fail people in war, in invasion, in oppression, and everyday indignity. And they said it clearly and repeatedly. This is not what God looks like. This is not what human community should be. And this is where this episode ends today. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for listening. And hopefully, you'll join me in the next episode.